Hey gang, Father Hollowell here, and just wanted to, before we dive into our lessons, wanted to begin with just a little bit of an introduction about what we're doing throughout these next couple of years. Lots of young people, young adults who were raised Catholic are leaving the church today. And one of the reasons that we know that that's happening is because so many of our young adults don't know hardly anything about what it is that we really believe as Catholics. Whereas maybe in the past people grew up knowing and learning about their faith, we have to a large extent lost a lot of that knowledge. And as young adults, I know I grew up in the Catholic Church and I still maybe didn't learn as much as I probably could have and should have about my faith. And so this is an opportunity to maybe step back and learn a little bit about our faith so that we know how to describe it, how to enjoy it, how to appreciate it, how to celebrate our faith as well. I want to invite you just to step back a little bit and forget maybe some of the things that you think you know about your Catholic faith and be open to the idea that maybe some of it you've been getting wrong, that there's a lot out there that maybe you don't or haven't had explained to you yet. I promise that if you do that, if you step back and you look at your faith in a new way and are open to maybe what we're going to talk about in these classes, that you will be very pleasantly surprised by what our faith has to say and has to offer to us. Our faith is beautiful. Our faith is intelligent. There's a lot of stuff there. There's a lot of great minds throughout the last 2,000 years and great saints who have been changed, had their lives changed by Catholicism. And so we want to walk through that and we want to talk about what is it that we believe? Why do we believe these things? So that before you reject your faith, you at least know what it is that we really believe. As we do that, I want to just begin by looking at a quick trailer by Father Robert Barron's Catholicism series. It was done for a video series that's been very popular, and I think it maybe will help us look at our faith in a new way and just kind of give you a preview of what it is that we're going to be looking at as we walk through our faith. So we'll take a time out, watch that, and then we'll get back together and begin with our first lesson.
The church is going through a dark period. The church is under fire, it's under attack. The Catholic story is being told, but being told by the wrong people in the wrong way. We need to tell our own story. We need to get the message out so as to draw people in. Catholicism is smart, Catholicism is beautiful, Catholicism is colorful, it's textured, it engages the mind and the heart and the body. Christianity always has an explosive power. If we let it be itself, it always has this transformative power. How do you find joy? The sure sign that God is alive in you is joy. I've come that you might have life and have it to the full. That's what Jesus said. Catholicism at its heart is not a no, it's a yes. In fact, it's the story of the whole world. It's your story.
Okay, so one of the things that we want to look at and actually begin, and maybe a place that you wouldn't think about beginning when we're talking about our Catholic faith, is today we're going to explore this concept of happiness and the moral law. And again, we think we might not even think to put those in the same sentence. Happiness and God's commandments and teachings about how to live. But we're going to look at what those two things have to do with each other. And again, be open to the idea, I challenge you to be open to the idea that maybe what God is inviting you to is happiness and peace and fulfillment, and maybe that's something that hasn't been brought to you. I know that changed my life when I recognized and listened to the voices of the past, the great teachers of our faith, who were saying to us that it's all about happiness, that our faith is really all comes down to this idea of happiness. So we want to look at why that is and how that happens. One of the things that early philosophers asked themselves is a question that people are still asking. What is the one thing, when you have it, that you want nothing else? What's the one thing that when you have it, you want nothing else? And the answer to that philosophers from the very beginning have found is happiness. Happiness is, and we're not talking about like a child at a birthday party. We're talking about a happiness in the sense of this peace, a contentment, an ability to have that inner sanctity and calm and happiness that comes from inside, that I experience within myself. That's what we're all searching for. And God made us then, what the church is proposing, and I invite you to be open to this idea and just explore it and see if this sounds right to you or not. But what the church is putting forward, has been putting forward from the very beginning, is that God made us to be happy. God made us to enjoy happiness. That's why God created us. Maybe not what you were thinking God made us for. Sometimes we have lots of different theories about why God made us, but they're not all true. The church is saying, what I'm proposing to you is that God has made you to be happy. Now, some people say, okay, well, yes, God made us to be happy in heaven, but what we recognize and what the saints have been telling us for the last 2,000 years and what Christ is getting at as well is that not only is God making us to be happy later, God wants us to be happy now, right here and now. God desires that, and God is encouraging us to chase that down and to pursue that right now. So how do we do that then? Okay, so maybe you're open to the idea, okay, God wants me to be happy. How do I do that? How do I get there? And what does the church have to say about the how? And so one of the things that the problem that we encounter with this idea that God is making me to be happy is that we have a lot of people telling you how to be happy. So in addition to God and the saints and the church proposing to you, hey, here's how you should be happy, here's how you can be happy if you pursue this, we have a lot of other people telling us that, no, I know how to make you happy, right? We have advertisers and so forth. Hey, buy Sprite and you'll be happy. You buy things, you'll be happy. Go see this movie and it'll fulfill all your dreams. I don't have any problem with Sprite or this movie. I'm just saying that those as examples, right? Buy this phone and you'll be happy, right? That's what all the commercials are geared towards. You're going to be happy. Everybody's going to be smiling. It's going to be great. No one sells you a product and says it won't make you happy. So we have a lot of people telling you, hey, this is how to be happy. But the question we have to ask ourselves, and this is what so many teenagers fail to stop and ask themselves, is, does any of it work? When people tell you that this is going to make you happy, test it. And ask yourself the question, did what that person said would make me happy, did it make me happy? If I buy the product, did it lead to my fulfillment? Did I lead to me wanting nothing else and being completely satisfied? Or did it leave me still empty? We have to test these things. We can't just keep listening to the people telling us this is what will make you happy when it doesn't make us happy. And the same thing should go for the church. If we try what the church is saying, if we try what the saints are saying, if we try what Christ is saying, and it doesn't make us happy, then we should leave. We should discount the church. So we have to try these things and ask, at the end of that, reflect, did it work? Did it make me happy? Did it lead to my peace or not? Human beings have always wanted and desired happiness, but how to find it has been the question, and it is the central question of our faith. How do we find happiness? How do we find human contentment and fulfillment? That is a central question of our faith, and maybe it hasn't been proposed to you in that way, and so I want to challenge you to think of it in that way. The church, Christ, the saints, everyone is asking you to consider this question. How do we find happiness? So our faith then, your Catholic faith that maybe you've grown up with your whole life in religious education and all of these vacation Bible school and all that stuff, but our faith is not, first of all, the catechism or the Bible or the rules. The question to ask your friends when you go to someone and you say, this is my Catholic faith, this is what I believe, it's not. You don't start with the catechism, the Bible, or those kinds of things. A good question to ask people that are searching for the truth, whether it's you or your friends, is, are you happy? Are you happy? That is a question that I want you to ask yourself right now. Are you happy? Do you feel and have that inner peace that comes from living in the life that Christ proposes? That is a question that we want to begin with. Not the rules, not the regulations, not the fasting, not the going to Mass on Sunday. Don't start with the rules. Start with this question. Are you happy? And we live in a world that's had a lot of opportunities to try all those other ways. The Sprites, the drinks, the sodas, the movies, the consumerism, all those buying of stuff. We have the ability to buy all of these things that we want in our country. We're blessed in that way. Has any of that led to your inner peace, your inner fulfillment? Are you happy? That's the question I want you to ask yourself. And so what I want to go through then in these next few minutes of our first lesson is to start to put the language in place so that we can understand what the church is proposing to you. Okay, so we're going to have some technical language in here, but it's so that we can develop a common way for us to talk about the church's path, what the church is proposing, what Christ and the saints are proposing to you to find happiness. And the first thing we need to talk about in the church's understanding of this is human nature. Right? We've heard that phrase probably elsewhere in other language or in other situations. So if we say, what the heck is human nature? We hear this all the time. People will say it's human nature to want this. Or it's human nature to do this thing or that thing over there. So when we talk about human nature, what we mean is that it's something that we all share in common as human beings. Something that's part of what it means to be a human being. Right? We can all admit that there are common experiences, common things, realities that are part of being a human being. And so when we talk about human nature, we're talking about that. And so the next step that we want to take when we're talking about human nature is that we also want to recognize that it's different. To be human is different than to be other types of animals or other types of beings. There's something that's unique about being a human being. We all know that. And the church takes it a step further and says, not only that, but it's also, we recognize and we can recognize when we look around the world honestly, that we as human beings are special. We're created in a special way that's different than the rest of creation. Pope Francis just wrote a letter to the whole world called Laudato Si about creation and protecting the environment and all these other sorts of things. But he said that he reiterated the church's teaching that's been there forever. It means we're different than the rest of creation. When we read the Genesis account in the Bible, we hear that over and over. We hear that in several different places, that it's special. God made human beings special. And this is very important when we look back at the book of Genesis for all of us and for what we're going to be doing the rest of our time together. We are special. The church says, and the Bible says, and the saints say, and Christ recognizes this, all of these people recognize that we are special because we are created in the image and likeness of God. That's very important. We are created in the image and likeness of God. Now, of course, Pope Francis, the Church, we've always said the same thing. Does that give us the right to mistreat other created beings? Can we run around and boss around animals and do whatever we want and pollute the earth and torture animals or whatever it might be? Does that give us the right to dominate creation? And of course, the answer to that in the Church and Pope Francis's letter, of course, over and over again is, of course not. We are placed over creation to care for creation and to rule it. It's placed underneath our feet by God. We are made special. We're made in the image and likeness of God. Squirrels are not made in the image and likeness of God. Icebergs are not made in the image and likeness of God. Mountains are not made in the image and likeness of God. Human beings are made in the image and likeness of God. We are special. So this human nature that we're talking about is things that we share in common as specially created people and realities that were willed by God in a special way. But we're supposed to, again, rule over creation with care and love. A definition then of human nature that I'd like you to remember, we're going to break this down a little bit more, obviously, as we go forward. Human nature. A definition of that by the Church. A rational being comprised of body and soul who is destined for happiness. Human nature definition is a rational being. To be a human being is to be a rational being comprised of body and soul who is destined for happiness. Now don't worry about the language, we'll break that down, but we need to develop a common language, and that's what we're doing right now. So, if we talk about this, let's go back. First of all, hang on and just take a pause. If you want to press pause on your video, you can. I want you to answer. These are your first two questions. You can write them down on a blank piece of paper. You can type out your answers, however you want to do that. But this is what you'll hand in to me. We'll have questions throughout, and you can turn this in when you're all done, and so forth. So the first two questions I'd like you to answer on a piece of paper. We all desire what? Blank. So it's a fill in the blank. We all desire blank. And then, the next thing that I would like you to do, question number 2, what is the definition of human nature that we just talked about on the previous slide? What is the definition of human nature? I'd like you to write that down, and again, we'll break those words apart later. So if you need to pause, go ahead, and we'll come back and pick up and we move forward. Okay, so we want to talk about this word, human reason. We hear it sometimes. We hear the word rational. Sometimes, Mom, you're not being rational. Maybe we say that before we get grounded. All of these types of things, human reason, rational, what does it mean? It means the ability to think and reflect on our thinking. So to be able to use my reasoning abilities, to be able to be a rational person, means to be able to think and reflect about the fact that I'm thinking. So when we say, Mom, you're not being rational, what we mean by that is, Mom, you're not thinking, you're not using your mind powers, right? Your human mind ability to think through things. Or when your mom says that you're not being rational, etc. Okay? So when we talk about rational human reason, we mean the ability to think, to use my brain, to use those human thinking abilities that no other creature that God made has. Okay? A couple of other things. We can be aware of the fact that we are aware. If you ever think about that, Pope John Paul II and others have talked about this, philosophers. Human beings have the unique ability to be aware of the fact that we are aware. So your cat is aware of the situation and the surroundings that it's placed in, a dog or animals, and et cetera, but only human beings are aware of the fact that we are aware. We can think about the fact that we can think. And so, again, looking at some of these things that make what does it mean to have human reason, to be rational? That's what that's getting at. This ability to think in a special way, in a way that's different than all of the rest of God's creation. Now let's look at that part of the definition that talks about body and immortal soul. This is really important. Our bodies and our souls, the Church says, we have to understand this. If we really want to be happy, if we really want to find happiness, this we have to get. Our bodies and our souls are intertwined. There is no mouse driving our bodies like a machine. So it's not like I have a machine body and then there's a soul inside of me and they're separate and one drives my body, my body's like a puppet or something like that, that theory is out there, right? That it's like my soul is the good part of me and my body is my clumsy bad part. No, we believe that our body and soul are intertwined and inseparable in that sense. They overlap, and there is this body and this immortal soul, and that they melt into one human person is a very important thing that we have to get if we're going to strive for happiness and understand what the church is saying. Other living things have souls. Only human souls are immortal. Now we believe again in that making of us as special, that part of that is that God made us immortal, that we cannot die, in the sense of our soul will not just evaporate and go into nothing. Our soul is eternal. From the moment that it's created, it now is going to exist forever. The question is where and how, but we believe that we are made, part of our specialness is that we are immortal and that we live forever. Our souls continue on, our bodies continue on forever. Human souls are immortal because human beings are made in the image and likeness of God. Cats are not made in the image and likeness of God, so their souls are not immortal. Dogs, animals, etc. Only human beings have immortal souls. Souls that are going to continue on for all eternity. Okay, so again, we're looking at this definition of human nature so we can strive and understand how to be happy. Again, let's go ahead and answer a couple more questions on your piece of paper. You can go ahead and pause it. Use the phrase human, reason, or rational in a sentence that makes sense. So if you can just make up your own sentence and do that. Number 4, what else besides humans have souls? What else besides humans have souls? The 5th question, why are human beings, body and soul, why are they immortal? Why are we as human beings immortal? Why are we going to live forever? And again, what does then immortal mean? What does immortal mean? So if you need to go ahead and pause again and answer those questions, feel free. And then go ahead and unpause it and we'll continue on. Okay, the last part of our time together today. How to find happiness. Then, now that we have this common language and these understanding of some of these terms, how do we find happiness? The thing that we need to admit, as we were saying earlier, we are sometimes deceived about what will bring us happiness. If we're really honest with ourselves, we're able to admit that we're deceived sometimes. We think, well, that Sprite's going to make me happy. We drink the Sprite and we find out, well, that didn't actually bring me eternal contentment and peace for the rest of my life. So, we are sometimes deceived about what will bring us happiness. We think maybe at times that pornography is going to bring me happiness, or gluttony and eating a lot of stuff, or consuming lots of things, or just watching TV for 9 hours is going to make me happy. We think that sometimes, but we find out that it doesn't actually make us truly happy. So a great question is, again, as we've been saying, how do we know what will truly make us happy? How do we know what will truly make us happy? Well, first of all, we have to desire and we have to recognize that some of these things don't work so that we can start looking for the authentic places where we're going to find happiness. Okay, so there's a great quote. One of the best quotes of all time is a quote by a man named St. Augustine, who lived a wild party lifestyle his whole life, fathered a child outside of marriage, was famous, wealthy, partier, everybody loved him, and he was the life of everything. And he has a radical conversion to God when he's a young adult. And he said in his autobiography, one of the great lines of Christianity, he said, "Our hearts are restless until they rest in God." Our hearts are restless until they rest in God. So you see people, you know people, and maybe you are yourself, but we see people in our own lives, at our schools, at our work, wherever it might be, that are restless because they're trying to fill this hole inside of their soul that can only be filled by God, and they're trying to cram all this kind of stuff in there. They're trying to fill that hole with television, food, and internet, and phones, and buying stuff, and just junk. Stuff that doesn't work. And that hole in our heart can only be filled by God when it rests in God. And that's what the church is proposing. That's what Christ is proposing. That's what the saints have said. Hey, I found happiness over here, and it was by my heart resting in God, my trusting in God, my recognizing that maybe I viewed God wrongly. Maybe God isn't a PE teacher who's sent simply to torture me and make my life miserable. Maybe God is actually wanting nothing for me other than my happiness, because God loves me more than I love myself. That is what St. Augustine recognizes, and he finally says that in a very beautiful way. And so we have this hangover, parties, all those kinds of things, that we thought was going to make us happy, and we find out we're miserable the next day. Here we have St. Augustine, who did all that, but what he finds is true peace is Scriptures, writing, being a priest, talking about holy things, drawing closer to God, and all the things that when his heart finally rests in God. God gives us a couple of tools to help us find happiness. This is what the church is proposing, and I'm offering this to you. You can think about it and test it out and see if they work. First of all, we have the first tool that God gives us is what we call the natural law. What is a natural law? Our thinking ability, our reasoning ability, our ability to think, to use our minds, lets us know in our nature when things are right and wrong. We know in our heart, sometimes when things are right and when they're wrong. And we feel that and we hear that speaking to us. We know it's wrong to murder. We feel that in our natural human nature, in our mind. We know that that's wrong. We know it's wrong to abort children. We know it's wrong to have sex before marriage. We know it's wrong to lie to people, right? All these things. We know that in our nature as a human being. We know. So God has placed inside you in ways to know and understand and believe and feel that things are right and when things are wrong. But we believe that my mind, my thinking ability can be what we call darkened by original sin. Okay, we call that concupiscence. Maybe you've heard that word before. Concupiscence is the sense in which because Adam and Eve sinned, because sin is a reality, the devil is a reality that's out there tempting me all the time and is tempting you all the time to not pursue authentic happiness, but to instead end up with him and he trying to destroy God's plan all the time for you and make you end up miserable and in hell ultimately. Sin can pull our human reasoning down into the dumps and can distract us and can mess with a little bit our ability to think sometimes. And so it can get us off track. And so it doesn't cause us to sin. The devil can never cause you to sin. It's really important to get that. The devil can never cause you to sin. No one can cause you to sin, can cause you to make a bad choice that will lead to your unhappiness. Only you can, but the devil can tempt us, can suggest things to us. Hey, that will actually make you happy. Having sex before you're married with your boyfriend, that will actually make you happy is what the devil might suggest to you. Or go to that party and get hammered and get drunk and all that stuff. That was really going to make you happy. The devil can suggest that and we can kind of go along with it because we don't want to think about it or we allow our intellect to be darkened through concupiscence. But the devil does not cause you to sin. Only you can choose to sin or to do the right thing. Sometimes you hear people say, I'm only human. And I say, boo to that. That's terrible. That's not a good thing to say, right? That's a terrible excuse. This is us wanting to blame someone else or to say, well, I'm weak or, no. God's given you everything that you need right now to choose to do the right thing, right? To choose happiness, to think, to sit back and say, what's going to make me happy and to pursue it. There's no blaming my humanity for my sin. Okay, I can't just that's like blaming someone else if you mess up in sports or something else. I used to play wide receiver. So if I dropped the ball, it'd be like me dropping the ball and then blaming the quarterback for a bad throw. No, I dropped the ball. It's not the quarterback's fault. In the same way, no. In sin, when we sin, we've chosen to sin. We've done it. It's not because I'm human. I can't blame it. I can't say, well, that's what we all do that. No, we don't. We don't all do that. Jesus didn't do all that. Mary didn't do that. So we can't use that excuse. That's not a good excuse. It means we don't understand what it means to be human. Right? But we do have an uphill battle. Concupiscence, the devil's ability to suggest to you that you should do something different, we have to fight that. That's a real foe that we have, obviously. Okay, so the second tool that God gives us to help us find happiness is revelation. Now, I don't mean the book of Revelation, I mean revelation in general. So the definition of that other gift that God's giving you to find happiness, the teachings that God has revealed to us, whether through the church or the Bible. The teachings that God has revealed to humanity, whether through the church or the Bible. God didn't just say, well, I gave you human nature, but sometimes the devil can pull that down because of original sin and suggest other things to you, so I'm going to now abandon you. No, he said, I'm going to continue to also not only just place this in your heart and in a natural law, it's there, but I'm also going to give you other gifts, other ways to come to know happiness. And that's through the teachings of the church and the teachings that we find in the Scriptures. Scriptures having been compiled by the church. So God continues to speak to us in other ways to say, hey, come over here. This is the true path. He speaks to us through prophets, through saints, through the church, through the Bible, all of these things. But Revelation is essentially the church's teachings and the Bible. That then makes it a wholly different reason for why we want to learn about our Catholic faith. If we believe that it's God telling us, here's how you find happiness, then you're going to watch the rest of these videos. If you think that you're just going to watch them because you have to learn the laws and etc. and more all that stuff, then you're not going to watch them. So how does Revelation or the teachings that God has given us help us find happiness? How do those teachings show us happiness? Okay, so our mind, our reason, we can figure out a lot of things about what's right and what's wrong. We can do a lot of that stuff. Okay? But through the natural gifts, but we also need God's teachings to help us find happiness. And again, we have to stop. The number one reason that you're going to leave the Catholic Church, if you do, is because you're going to think of God's laws as a burden. God putting something on you, God making you do this, making you do that, etc., etc. That is the number one reason I think that most people leave the church. They don't understand what God's laws really are. They don't think that the church is trying to help them find happiness. They don't think Jesus is trying to help them find happiness. And they don't think that God's laws are there to try and help them find happiness. They see it all as something that's being done to them, something that they're being forced to do. But we know that the only reason that God gives us laws, teachings, commandments, beatitudes, etc. is to show us how to be happy. How to find the happiness that St. Augustine found. How to rest in God. That's the whole reason God gives us these things. And we have to get that, or else we're not going to pay any attention to anything else, and we're going to ultimately leave the church and do whatever we want to do. Okay. We will never get Catholicism. We will never fall in love with God if we think of it all in terms of rules and regulations that we are supposed to follow. So we won't be punished. You will never stay Catholic simply to avoid punishment. And I think that's a really important point. So we end up here with some questions, 7 through 10. The final few questions. What is St. Augustine's quote about happiness? Question 8. What are the 2 tools to help us find happiness? Number 9, if someone asked you what the point of Catholicism is, what would you say to them if they asked you at school or etc.? What is the stigmata? This would be, then you're going to have to look in your textbook under the saint for this chapter. And I have a question, what is the stigmata and who is St. Catherine of Siena in a couple of sentences? Can you sum up who she is and her life? Okay, that's the end of our first episode today, and I hope that something in there helped you. And as you learn about your Catholic faith, hopefully it helps you fall in love more deeply with your Catholic faith as well. And look forward to getting back with you next week for our second segment. And as always, if you have any questions or anything I can help with, don't hesitate to let me know. God bless.